Welcome back to Sunrise, and as promised, we did open the program with that good news from Oriire local government area of your state about the rescue of the children and teachers who are abducted from Ahuru Esienle community in Ogbomosho, and the good news of their rescue. That was by, several security agencies were involved in that rescue, and I believe that they have been planning it for some time. But for security reasons, of course, we cannot divulge all the information and the planning process. But I do know that at a point, the Air Force leadership went to meet Governor Seyi Makinde in Ibadan to talk about collaboration and to see how the Air Force can use its aerial surveillance to locate the children and the teachers where they're being kept, and the logistics that it'll take to get to them. And that breakthrough finally happened at some point. I think could have been yesterday night, could have been the day before. We're not quite sure exactly when it happened, but the good news is that it did happen. And let's talk more about this. So we're joined from our Abuja studios by the former Director, Department of State Services, Mr. Mike Ejiofor. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you for having me.
Right. By the time the news eventually broke that, these children were rescued, I know that you probably would have had an inkling as to, what's going on and how it's happening. Of course, you would not be able to discuss it with anyone too, because of the, precarious situation. But, what are your thoughts on this particular rescue mission and, the fact that it had to involve so many security agencies and the peculiarity of this? Because as we've been saying, abductions and kidnappings of this magnitude rarely take place in the Southwest, but here we are. So what are your thoughts on this rescue mission and the fact that it was a success, and officials say that there were no negotiations, no ransoms paid, just clean rescue of those kidnapped victims?
Yeah, first of all, I must congratulate the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Commend all the agencies, security agencies that were involved in the operation, because this shows that we can achieve a lot through our joint efforts. This was achieved through a lot of coordination, cooperation, and synergy among all the security agencies. And of course, you know that the operations must be intelligence driven. Before I go into my reaction, I think it's important to note here, or to find out what actually happened. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah. Okay. So the kidnap was orchestrated by Ansaru. Of course, you know that Ansaru broke away from Boko Haram in 2012 because of disagreement over their operations. The Ansaru is known for, targeting public places, churches, schools, and Western interests and expatriates. So that has been their major target, and that was where they had a great disagreement and they broke out. It's important that I give this little background, because Ansaru on itself, the leader of Ansaru, Abbas, has been declared wanted for over 13 years by United States, UK, and United Arab Emirates, that he's very wanted, he's deadly. And when the present leadership of the State Security Service came into power, he prioritized arresting the leadership of these various organizations. So in May last year, Abbas was arrested and taken into custody. His replacement was also arrested in July of same year. And ever since, they have been looking for a way to get them released, and they went to that it's better for them to go to the Southwest, which is the base of the president. You know, their own is to discredit government. They now went to the Southwest, did this mass kidnapping, even though they were intelligence, but that they were going to strike. But then, what happened was that they went to very remote area where they had this kidnap carried out, and ever since, the intelligence agency, their main purpose was that those two leaders, Abbas and Mahmouda, must be released on condition. So the security agencies now applied both kinetic and non-kinetic approaches and had this successful operation. There's no need going into details of how it was done, but suffice to say that no negotiations were paid. It's not like what we used to have before, when you see people dressed in uniforms celebrating their release, and you can see the joy in the in the face of the people who were released. And I think because there are many ongoing operations, I think it's sufficient for what we have seen. But the most important thing is that the people have been free, even though there were some casualties on both sides, both on the security services and the side of the man that was beheaded. That shows how inhumane these people are. And I think government will be in a position to address and take care of these other people.
Right. Mr. Jofo, really, so how difficult, was this operation? We can talk about it more openly now because, largely, aside from the casualties, which is heartbreaking, really, from the side of the security forces, and of course that teacher you spoke about. How difficult was this operation, knowing that there were precious jewels involved? Children as young as 2 years old were there. What kind of planning would have gone into this operation to ensure that absolutely nothing goes wrong and that everybody that was supposed to be rescued, come out alive and well?
Yeah, a lot. Actually, a lot went into this operation. Like I said, there are many ongoing operations that we don't need to discuss details. But suffice to say that both kinetic and non-kinetic approaches were used. Even psychological pressure on part of the kidnappers, because they are human beings, they have feelings too. So some psychological pressures were also put on them that they should not harm these victims. And by the time they were separated, in fact, it's worthy to note that we should mention that all the armed forces, including civil defense, SSS, backed this operation and surrounded the areas, cut off their sources of food, supplies, and a lot of pressure was put on them not to put these people in harm's way. And I think that's why we succeeded in getting this. So kudos. And I believe that more successes are upcoming.
Right. And as you've rightly said, this Ansaru faction is known for soft targets, as you put it, and, which is why they have misunderstanding with the other larger Boko Haram group. But, Oriire is just one of those communities in, a remote area of, Nigeria. There was also, that attack in Kayama local government area of Kwara State sometime last year. And there are so many other soft targets across the country. This is just one of them. How do we protect these communities such that, these kind of groups would not launch another attack, or just ensure that they're better protected?
Yeah, I think apart from security intelligence services providing intelligence to prevent it from happening, because that's the most important thing, that it must be prevented from happening. You provide intelligence, the action agencies must also rise to the occasion by making sure it doesn't happen. The communities also have rules to play. So we don't think, we don't just rely on the security agencies alone. The government has a role to play, both at the federal and sub-national level. I think by this, we should be able to tackle this thing from happening. Don't also forget that these Ansaru are people who have knowledge, technology, computer science. They are very deadly people, and so that's why the security agencies too have to be very careful in monitoring and surveilling them, because they are also sophisticated.
You know, just perhaps by way of continuing in that particular conversation and taking from that same question, since this conversation started, Mr. Jofo, it's been on my mind to ask the governor of Oyo State, just, I don't know, maybe about the same time or just a little while before the rescue was announced. He was in Bauchi speaking to the media and talking about the fact that the governors have no authority over federal agencies, which invariably is also responsible for how long, could also have been responsible for why this has taken so long, and that the governor cannot, of the chief security, so-called chief security of the state, cannot command or give any operational instruction to the police, to the DSS, or to the military, and all of that. And consequently, maybe this is part of the reason that this has taken this long. What are your thoughts on that? I know there is the talk of state police, on the table, but what are your thoughts on that? Because there are those who believe that this whole idea of state police may not even kick in until well after the election, because no state governor is likely, according to an analyst, no state is likely to have any state police in place before the general elections next year. So what are your thoughts on that? Because as Joke has asked, if we are going to ensure that this doesn't happen again, we need to have soft infrastructure already.
Well, I think we must make a distinction here in crime or criminality. You have what we call state crimes, crimes against the state, which the SSS is charged with, like espionage, sabotage. This goes outside the purview of the state government. So even if the state government the federal government is battling with this, so how can the state government have the capacity to deal with such state crimes, like insurgency, this mass kidnapping? They might not have, even if they have the money, they might not have the capacity. But I also think that with the creation of the state police, there must be a boundary, there must be a line between the state crimes and ordinary crimes, which the state police can handle. And so I think what we are doing, I agree that the state governors will also tell you that they don't have powers or control. And it's not entirely correct that they don't have control over the state, the federal government security agencies. Because at the state level, we have what we call a state security council, where such security issues are discussed. And the governors, you know it very well, offer advice, even equip the security agencies. So it's not completely true that they don't have control. But if they have control, like the state police, their function should be to help in gathering intelligence and prevent minor crimes against the state crimes, which we are talking about. So I think what if you see, I look at Enugu example, I think most states, if we adopt and get state police created, Enugu should be a model, because you can see, I traveled to Enugu, I was marveled at what they have there in terms of looking at technology deployment in Enugu. Almost every kilometer you see vehicles deployed with cameras. Police is not stopping you. And crime has reduced in that state. He just completed the DNA center, which is not only serving the state, serving the country, but the entire African continent. So we should prioritize our security, because without security, there's nothing.
It sounds to me like there is, we still have quite some work to do in terms of delineating between the functions of the state police and the functions of the federal security operatives. So you're saying that the kidnapping, the mass kidnapping that took place in Oyo State would have been beyond the authorities of a state police infrastructure, and that it's more of a federal a crime. What exactly, help us understand that, because you're saying that even if the state police were in place, the state police may not have been able to prevent or even conduct the rescue of these kids.
You see, there must be a collaboration between the federal agencies and the state agencies. The state agencies will provide the necessary intelligence because they know the terrain, and pass on to the federal agencies to help in collaboration. We know one agency, like what happened in Oyo State, this freeing of the kidnapped victims. It was not one agency that achieved it. All the agencies were involved. So the state police is not going to work in silo without collaborating with the federal agency. But as time goes on, possibly during the establishment of the police, all this is to be streamlined and demarcated.
You said something very important, Mr. Jofo. You talked about the fact that the criminal elements are out for one thing and one thing only, to discredit government. And it will seem like politicians tend to latch on to that and conduct their own business as well, just to get some sympathies from the people, perhaps. But the reality is, these things are happening to people. And so, isn't there a way to ensure that these things do not happen? I have said it countless times that I have seen that one of in fact, the number one function of the police is crime prevention, not crime fighting. It will seem like we wait only to fight crimes, to react, and not to be proactive. How do we ensure that we get to the space where these things don't happen, we anticipate them, and we nip them in the bud?
There are so many things involved in the question you raised. We talk of funding. Our security agencies adequately funded? That's one aspect of it. What is the commitment, loyalty, welfare of the people? You don't expect people to go and just sacrifice their life for. So I believe that. I wish, okay. So it's very important that government should prioritize security, because the primary purpose of government is welfare and security of the people. I think the government is also prioritizing it. Now that election is upcoming, like you said, our politicians also contribute to all this to discredit government. But I don't have any particular evidence to say. But the main purpose of these terrorist groups is to instill fear in the people, make people lose confidence in government, and discredit government, bring government to disrepute.
Right, and we have to go, but very quickly, just this final question for you. This kind of coordination that we saw, take place in Oyo State, it's not the first time we hear of kidnap incidents, because they also happen in the northern part of the country. How often do you have this number of security agencies, going in to rescue victims of kidnapping in other parts of the country? I know that you said there are many operations going on that we cannot talk about, but how tight are these operations, juxtaposed with what happened in Oyo State and what's going on in other parts of the country?
I can tell you that that's what's going on all over the country. There's jointness in their operations, and it must be sustained and encouraged. Even in a family, a nuclear family, you still have a disagreement. So even the disagreement at the leadership and management level, they are quickly resolved to ensure that we move on.
Right. I must thank you for your time. Thank you for giving us, expatiating on this matter. Mike Ejiofor, former director, Department of State Services, he joined us from our Abuja studio. A pleasure again having you on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Right, and when we come back, we'll have more to, bring to your table. A lot has happened over the week.
Particularly in the last 2 weeks.
Scandals.
Yes.
Scandalous situations, I must put. Blames and counter-blaming.
In fact, including one that's already in the court. We'll talk about that when we return.